This tutorial is going to take us through how to use Google Earth Engine and all the power behind that to create your own web app. This particular tutorial is going to be about detecting mangrove growth in different parts of the world, where you can compare what it looked like between two different years. So either mangrove growth or degrowth, I guess you might call it, or mangrove destruction. Google Earth Engine is available to use. Anyone can use it, and you can access it by going to code.earthengine.google.com and logging in with your Gmail account. And what you can do is you can just start to write code up here that will affect the Google map below. This is the app that I've made, and I'm going to just show you what it looks like. I created this in Google App Engine, and then they actually give you the capability to create a public web app. So the idea behind this is that I'm going to change this to satellite because I find this a little bit easier. And I'm going to just hone in on Florida in the USA because I know there's lots of mangroves there. And I'm just going to zoom in, and there's a bunch down here. So first thing is to draw a region. So this is my region. There is a limit to how much memory you can use in Google Earth Engine. So I find that if I just hone in on a small region, so this is the region I'm looking at. And then here are sliders where I can change what years I'm comparing. And the information we have is from 2000 to 2024, basically, at this point. I'm going to say, oh, I want to compare 2008 to 2022. And what I do is say compare years. Up here, you'll see that it creates these layers. The first is my user geometry, which is my polygon that I drew. So that just defines the area. But really, to view the growth, we want to make that invisible. So you can either turn it on or off. I'll turn that off so we don't need to see it. It will create a layer for 2008 and a layer for 2022. And we wait for it to draw it. So it does take some time, because it's going through and detecting what it thinks are mangroves. So the deeper the red, or the kind of the rusty color, is more detection of mangroves. And you see there's kind of this lighter color, which is actually, I think, just vegetation. And we can, certainly zoom in more if we want. Of course, that's to redraw everything at that point then. So my user geometry is my defined area. Okay, I think now I can, yeah, so there's my area, which generally it will cover up what you're really trying to see. Now these are sliders, so you can, remove them, but you can also click these off. So this was 2008, and this is 2022. So you can see there's a little bit lost out here, but in general it looks like there's more mangroves in 2022 than in 2008. And you can try to, use sliders as well to turn things on and off. But that's the general idea, is that a person can look and compare between 2 years to see what's happened to the mangrove situation in a particular area. The nice thing is we've got our own URL here with our web app available. And this can all be done in Google Earth Engine. I'm going to walk you through how I built this. First step is I watched this really good YouTube video. This is put on by NASA, and these two scientists, Abigail and Tamilola, and they did an excellent job of kind of walking through some of the features of Google Earth Engine and how you can actually code it. So I highly recommend. It's kind of long. It's almost 2 hours, but well worth it. And in fact, it's a 3-part series, so you could actually watch the whole series. But this one I found the most helpful to me to get started. And in fact, I used some of their code. So they had their code available, which I was able to start with. I actually used their code, played with it, figured out what was going on, and then I moved to my own, which I'm going to walk us through here. The first step is to load the library of images that are there. And so the ones that they use are Landsat, so you can search for it, Landsat 8. And I want Collection 2, Tier 1. And it gives you some information about it. The bands are what is useful, and they talk about this in the NASA video. the different bands of red, blue, and green, which allows you to detect certain things like water, like soil, like vegetation. And they go into quite a bit about how that works. This is helpful in terms of detecting clouds and that kind of thing. They go through quite a bit of it in the NASA videos, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. They are the scientists, so I'll leave it to them. You actually have to then say import. It will import it as an image collection, and we're going to call this L8, which stands for Landsat 8, so that we're going to use this. So Landsat 8 is an image collection of images from a NASA satellite. And there was a previous one called Landsat 7. So Landsat 8 only started in 2013. So anything previous that we want to look at, and we're going to start at 2000. So you have to use the older images, which is Landsat 7. So I'm going to add that one. Same thing. They've got the bands, etc. And I will import that. And I'm going to call that L7. I'm going to save this so you can save your script. So see, I've got a few scripts over here. If you don't save it, it goes away if you exit out of this window. So I'm just going to save it. I've called mine Mangrove Compare. To create a script, you just do new file and it will save it in your repository. And then the third one is NASA SRTM, which is digital elevation 30 meters. And this is going to give us the elevation information that we need. Mangroves are in coastal areas, so we want to be able to detect this. And this gives us better accuracy, so we're going to import that one as well. And that one is SRTM, we're going to call. So these just set up variables that we can then access. And those three things will give us what we need for this app. The first thing we're going to do is include a variable. This is the user geometry. So a user, and this isn't exactly how it's going to work in the app itself, but basically I click on this little polygon tool and I can, draw a polygon, and then that becomes my geometry. So it adds a layer called geometry here. In our case, we're going to call it user geometry in our app, but that's pretty much how it works. Now we can go to this and delete it if we want. We are creating our own geometry. And then the next set of functions was supplied really by the NASA tutorial. We've got cloud masking. This code will look for clouds in the images and mask them out. In areas where mangroves are, there's a lot of rain, a lot of clouds. In the images, they want to eliminate the clouds so that they can actually detect what's a mangrove and what's not. The next function they give us is, let me open this up more so I can see it. So these are the spectral indices, and the indices relate to the bands that we were looking at in the Landsat data sets. So the NDVI is something that will detect vegetation in green, and then the NDMI measures vegetation or soil moisture. So both of these things combined are going to tell us vegetation that would lend itself to being a mangrove. So these combination of bands, so these are the different bands that are detected or contained in the images that are collected by these satellites. And these are the ones that are going to give us the information that will enable us to detect mangroves or not. Just so we know, this one is really for Landsat 8 imagery. Landsat 7 imagery is, some of the indices are slightly named something different. So because of that, we're going to just have two different functions that basically give us the image with those bands identified. And remember, we're just using Landsat 7 for older images prior to 2013, and the Landsat 8 will be for anything newer than 2013. And then the next function is to add a layer, and this is for Landsat 7. So again, remember, we've just got the two slightly different image sets with slightly different bands. So we're creating two different functions for it. So this is for Landsat 7, which are the older images. There's a lot of commenting that are mostly debug statements. But basically we say for a chosen year, so we have a start date of, we do January 1st of the previous year and December 31st of the following year. And then we will get the mapping for that year. We filter out the information just to look at the start and end date, so between those two dates. Then we mask the cloud. So these are the two functions above that we just added. So we're going to mask the clouds and add the indices. And then if you remember, we have this SRTM. And what this gives us is an elevation mask of 65 meters or less. Again, we're only really looking at coastal areas for mangroves. So chances are it's not going to be anything higher than 65 meters tall. So this allows us to kind of, again, hone in more closely on what is going to be our mangroves. And then this composite basically takes the clip of our bounding box where we do with our polygon, and it uses this what's called median reducer. So it gets the median value for a pixel across that time period. Right, so we've got images over an entire year, and we're trying to get one piece of data, so it does this calculation to get the median value. We're really just making a composite image, and then we're looking at those two bands in particular, the NDVI and NDWI, to create a mask. And we're looking in a particular value, and these were supplied by NASA as to the correct values to look for if you're looking to identify mangroves. And then we create a new composite, which is including those masks, those three masks. So the elevation that we're looking for, and then the NDVI and NDWI for the vegetation. Then to display it, to give us the coloring on the layer, we're adding these bands, which are the RGB values. These mins and maxes were found by looking at these bands and finding where they ranged from. For our particular situation, these were the correct min and max values to have them appear in the image. And then the last part is to then add this layer to the map. That's where we get the layer that has the coloring on it, from the yellow to the rusty color. Okay, so this entire function will do all the work to create that layer. Likewise, I have pretty much the exact same function, but for Landsat 8 images, and I'm just going to comment that out. That's another debug statement. So it essentially does the same thing, but using the correct indices, etc., and using the functions that we've created for Landsat 8. The next thing is a general function that's going to create the correct layer. So this function is going to be called update map. So you pass it the year. So the year that we're looking for. So this update map function, first thing it will look to see, did the user draw a box? And if there's no area selected yet, we're not going to do anything. Otherwise, and again, I've got some commented out code, which I don't actually need here anymore, so I'll delete that. And this I decided I didn't need because the user had already zoomed in where they want it to be, so we're just going to delete that as well. And so the first thing is, unless the user has already selected it, but we're going to select the satellite view instead of the map view. And then depending on if the year is 2013 or greater, we're going to use Landsat 8. Otherwise, if it's before 2013, we're going to use Landsat 7. So that's all that does. So it basically is calling either of these two functions above to add that layer. That's pretty much the map part of it. The next thing we want to do is add our side panel to allow the user to choose some things. So we have a side panel, and most of this I was just asking for help from my Gen AI tool. I started using Claude, but I actually found I was having some issues. ChatGPT gave me better information. So ChatGPT seems to know a lot about Google Earth Engine, so I would recommend if you're asking for help or have some debugging questions to maybe go with ChatGPT. I used a combination of that and Claude. You create a side panel, create a variable. It's a UI panel. You just tell it, the layout. We want it to flow vertically and the size. I wanted it to appear on the left because I didn't want it interfering with the actual map, etc. So that just gives you a panel. Okay, so the different pieces I'm adding are also going to be variables, and basically you create the variable and then add them to the panel. So the draw button is where I say draw a region, and it's going to allow the drawing tools. So these drawing tools won't appear. I'm going to turn them off. And then once the user clicks on the button, it's going to allow the user to draw a polygon. So that's all that does. I've got a set of instructions, and this is just going to be a label. So it's a UI label, so it tells the user what to do. Draw the region, set the years in the sliders, and then click on the Compare Years button to do the actual comparison. And here are my two sliders. So I've got a year one slider. So it's a slider that starts at 2000, goes to 2024. They can change it by a step of 1. So each year, the starting value is 2010. This one's the same, and my starting year is 2020. So those are the kind of the defaults we start with, 2010 and 2020. As the user moves the sliders, I've set up two variables for the labels. So my default is 2010 and 2020 for the years. When the user changes anything on the slider, moves the slider, an on-change event is triggered, and it just is going to update the label so we know what years we're dealing with. And then my compare button, so this is where all the action is going to happen. So they've set their sliders, hopefully, they've set their region, and then they click the compare button. This is going to set up a label, compare years. On the on click, first thing it's going to do is remove any previous layers. So this is just looking for any layers that has the word mangroves in it. So that would be from previous iterations. And so it would remove them. So we don't want additional layers, just continuously adding other layers. So we're going to remove them. Then it gets the values from the slider as my two variables, updates the map with year one, and then updates the map with year two. So that essentially just adds those two layers. And then I will add my widgets to the side panel. So I've got my instruction label, my draw button, my year one label, my year one slider, year two label, year two slider, and my compare button. And then I add this entire panel to the map so that it will appear on top of the map. This just sets up kind of the defaults for the map. So I don't want my drawing tools to appear. So down here, again, I don't want these to appear because the only thing I want them to be able to do is to draw the region once they click the button, and then it will disappear. And then kind of reset all the layers just to center it at, I center it almost at the 0, 0 for latitude and longitude, about halfway zoomed in. This last one, it probably isn't the correct placement of this, but is when the user draws. So when the user chooses to draw their region, it creates this user geometry. Again, I've got a debug statement in there, but basically it clears everything and then it adds this new layer to the map and makes sure that it's kind of the top layer. Okay, so that's just for drawing a layer. And so what we could do is, if you go up here and we hit run, it's going to run it as it would appear. And what I might do is, just to show you, a print statement's going to appear in the console. So let me run this again. And if I say draw a region, and if I go here, I don't think there's any mangroves here, but yeah, so it says user drew geometry, which is my print statement. So if you're doing any debugging, it's going to, and it gives me the polygon and the coordinates, etc. This was all part of my debugging, but just so you can see what will happen in the console. Let me run this again. So again, if I come over here and I just zoom in and I say, I want to draw my region here. And if I wanted to go back to 2004 and compare those 2 years, L7 is not defined. Okay, because I named it wrong. It's lowercase. As you're running it, any errors will appear up here in the console, and you'll have to debug as you go. So let's run again, draw a region, let's try again. This is kind of a pain in the neck to have to do this every time, but and let's do it's going to create my two layers, and again I use a geometry as I drew it. Again, you always want to it's helpful to zoom in. Have to be very patient because it's doing a lot of work here. And I may not get many mangroves here, but let's see. And same thing, I can, change these so you can see the changes that occur. That's the general idea, and there's a lot more you can do with this, but this is just to show you a place to get started. All right, so say I've worked through this, I've debugged it, I've got it looking the way I want. What you can then do is go up here to your apps button. Now I have the one that I've created, but I can say I want to create a new app. So you can either have it only you can edit it, or you can have it in the cloud so other people can edit it. And then we click next, and I want to say Mangrove comparison tool, and I do next, and then I say current contents of the editor. Otherwise you give it the actual name over here in your list, but if I say do this, and then you would publish. I'm not going to publish because I already have mine, but basically you would say publish, and then it would come back with a URL. So it would be similar to this. And what you could do is then copy this URL, copy link address, and then you would be able to go to that page and it would appear this way. So basically it will give you a URL that you can share with others. So this is the one that I have. This is my ID to update it. And then this is the actual URL link. So this is the one that you would share with other people. And it is featured in your public apps gallery. So you have your own gallery. So you can go to it now. Just so you know, the first time I launched this, it actually took several minutes before it was available. So you just have to be patient. It's going to publish it and probably compile it all. So you will have to wait a minute, but then you will have an app that is available online for other people to see. At any point, you can update your app, go back to your apps and just say, I want to update it. Click on it, it will update. So your online app will reflect your changes. So hopefully this will give you something to start with. Certainly in the NASA video, I'm going to put the link in my description, but this also goes into taking the next step to make a prediction model based upon the information. So predicting mangrove growth in certain areas. So what we did was actually a classification. We are classifying based upon images what we believe are mangroves growing and color coding it. The next step would be potentially to make your own model using a random forest classifier. And this video goes through it step by step and goes through the next iteration of it. You can take this to many different levels, and we are eager to see what you can come up with.